Welcome everyone to another Christmas theme Blender tutorial. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create these 10 procedural Christmas ball ornaments in Blender. So I'm filming this video on December 3rd of 2022, and every December I enjoy creating Christmas themed tutorials. And if you'd like to watch more Christmas themed tutorials, then definitely check out my Christmas tutorial playlist with the link in the description. And if you'd like to create a Christmas tree to add the Christmas ball ornaments on, then you can also check out my Christmas tree Blender tutorial series, which I created last year. Again, links in the description. And if you have any Christmas themed tutorial ideas that you'd like me to make, then definitely let me know in the comments. If you'd like to help support the channel and purchase the tutorial files, then you can get that over on my Gumroad store and my Patreon page with the links in the description. And you can also check out my Blender procedural material packs if you'd like to purchase more of my materials. And to learn how to create more procedural materials, you can also check out my Blender procedural material tutorial playlist. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to create all of these 10 procedural Christmas ball ornaments, but if you'd like to jump to a certain part and learn how to create just one of the Christmas ball ornaments, then I'll have timestamps in the video description and you can learn how to create just a single Christmas ornament. Now I'm not going to show you how to create the glitter Christmas ball ornament, because for that ornament I'm actually just going to be using my procedural glitter material. And I have a different tutorial on how to create the procedural glitter material, so you can check that out with the link in the description. It's a video I posted recently. So you can go ahead and watch that video, and then we're going to be appending in the data from that blend file into this blend file, and we're going to be adding it to the ornament. Now to help us get some very realistic lighting, I'm going to be using this Photo Studio Loft Hall, and this is a free HDRI from polyhaven.com. I'll have the link in the description if you'd like to download it. And I downloaded the 1K HDR version, and you can just download this. Or you can find some other HDRI from Polyhaven to help with some nice realistic lighting. Now some of these Christmas ball ornaments are going to be using the displacements in the node editor, and so I am going to be using the Cycles rendering engine so that I can use the node editor displacements. And also I am going for realism, so if you want it to look more realistic, then definitely use Cycles. So here I am in Blender, and we can get started by setting up the 3D scene. And also, if you want to see my screencast keys, they will be right down here in the corner so you can see what buttons I'm pressing. So I'm just going to start by pressing the A key to select everything, and then I can press X, and let's click on delete. I'm now going to press Shift A, and let's go to Mesh, and I'm going to add an icosphere. And then right above me, if you click on the Add Icosphere settings, I'm going to turn the subdivisions up pretty high to like a 6, because some of these Christmas ornaments are going to be using the displacements, and so I do want a pretty detailed icosphere so that the displacements have more geometry. And then I can close the Add Icosphere settings, and then let's use the Object Context menu and shade the object smooth. Now I also want to create the little hook, which is kind of on top. So to do that, I can press Shift A, let's go to Mesh, and I'm going to add a circle. And then I can press G to grab, and let's hit Z, you just bring it up on the Z axis, and then I can scale the entire thing down. And then I can press the Tab key to go into edit mode, and you can't see it because it's inside the Christmas ornament, but what I'm going to do is hit E to extrude. I'm then going to hit Z to bring it up on the Z axis and just place it there. And then I can scale the whole thing down a bit. And I'm going to bring it down on the Z axis just like that. And then I can press the F key to fill a face there. Now I can see that the normals need to be recalculated because the shading looks a bit off. You can see with the matte cap here, it is darker over here, but this one over here, it's darker over here. So I just need to recalculate the normals. So I'm going to double tap the A key to select everything, and then I can press Shift N to recalculate the normals. And I will press the Tab key to go back to object mode, and then again using the Object Context menu, I can shade the object smooth. Now you can see that it's not sharp there on the edge, so I'm going to add a bevel to sharpen that up. So I'm going to click right here on the modifier properties. Let's click on Add Modifier, and here under Generate, I can add the bevel. And then I will just turn the bevel segments up to like 3, and I can also hold down the Shift key and then drag the amount. And if you hold down the Shift key as you drag the value, it'll make your movements more sensitive. So I'm just going to bring it down there to about there. I could also scale the whole thing down a bit, just like that. So something like that is pretty good. Maybe bring the whole object up a little bit on the Z axis. So I'm going to select this object and press the Tab key to go back into edit mode, and then I want to create a little hook. So I'll press Shift A, and you can see because we're in edit mode, we're only able to add mesh objects. We're not able to add any other objects because we're in edit mode of the object. So I'm going to go right down here and add a torus, and I can press G to grab, bring it up on the Z-axis, and I can also scale the whole thing down. And then I want to rotate it, and I want to rotate it on the X-axis. And I can type in 90 and enter to rotate it over exactly by 90 degrees. And then I can press 1 on the numpad, and that'll take me to front view, and I'm just going to zoom in. Now I want to delete the bottom half, so I'm going to hold down the Z button and go to wireframe, and then I just want to deselect the top here. So I'm going to press B for the box select, and then I'm going to move my mouse here, and then I can click down with my middle mouse wheel, and I'm going to drag a box around the top area and then let go. So now that we just have the bottom selected, I can press the X key and I can click on vertices. So we're going to delete the vertices. And then I want to extrude the bottom part down, so I can click and drag and just add a box select on these vertices. Just make sure you select the bottom ones there, and I can hit E to extrude and then hit Z to bring it down on the Z axis. So I now just want to select the entire hook and I want to scale it down. So with your mouse hovered over the hook object, you can press the L key. That's going to select the linked vertices, and then I can scale the entire thing down, and then I can bring the entire thing down on the Z axis and maybe scale it up a little bit. And then I will press the tab key to go back to object mode, and I can hold down the Z button and go back to solid view. Now, if I zoom in here, you can see that I need to shade the object smooth. So using the object context menu, I'll click on shade smooth. Now there are a few issues here, and that is because of the bevel modifier. So you can see there's like a sharp area there, and that is because of the limit method. So the limit method is set to angle, and I do want to use the angle limit method because I want to add a bevel on this side here, but I don't want to add a bevel around this side. So what the limit method is going to do is it's only going to add a bevel if there is an angle larger than the angle amount. And so right here, you can see that it's adding a bevel there, but I don't want it to add a bevel there. So I can just turn the angle up. I'm just going to turn it up to like a 33, and that should be enough. So you can see that it's not adding a bevel to any of these parts here, and it's also not adding a bevel to any of these faces here, but because this angle is larger, it's going to add a bevel there. So that is what I want. So we should also save this Blender file, so you can press Ctrl S or click on File and click on Save As. And I'll just save this as Christmas Ornaments in a folder with all my other files, and I will click on Save As. And then you can press Ctrl S to save the Blender file as you're working on the project. So now let's set up the lighting. So to set up the lighting, I'm going to go right over here to the world properties, and then I'm going to go right here to the surface, and right here on color, I'm going to click on the yellow dot, and then I'm going to choose environment texture here under texture. And then let's click on open to open up an HDRI. And here's the HDRI that I'm going to be using. So again, this is a free HDRI from polyhaven.com. It's the Photo Studio Loft Hall, and I downloaded the 1K HDR version. So you can just click on open image to open that up. So I can now hold down the Z button and I'll move my mouse up into the rendered view to actually see this in the rendered mode. Now, I don't want to be able to see the HDRI in the background because it is a little bit distracting. So I'm going to click right here on the render properties, and I'm going to open up the film tab, and then I can click on the transparent button. And so this way the background is just going to be transparent, but it's still going to be lighting up the scene. And then also let's go here to the color management, and I'm going to use the view transform of Filmic, and on the look here, I'm going to set this to high contrast, and this will make the colors more contrasty and saturated, and it'll make the final image look nicer. So now we can do the materials. So I'm going to click right over here to go to the shading workspace, and over here on the shading workspace, I have the 3D space here, and then the shader editor here. I'm going to hold down the Z button and move my mouse up into the rendered view, and I will make this smaller. And then I'm also going to be using the Node Wrangler add-on to preview the different nodes. So if you don't have the Node Wrangler enabled, you can click on edit and you can go to the preferences, and then over there in the add-ons tab, just search for a Node Wrangler, and then you can check mark the Node Wrangler add-on. So it's built into Blender, and I'll show you how to use the add-on in the video. So I'm first going to start by creating the hook material. So I'm going to select the object right here, and I can click on new to add a new material, and I can just rename this to hook. Now this is going to be a very simple material, so let's just take the base color, and I'm just going to make it kind of like a light gray. I can also zoom in here to see it, and then I do want it to be a metallic material, so let's turn the metallic value all the way up to 1. And then I do also want it to be very reflective, so let's turn the roughness value here down to like a 0.3. And there we go. So I'm just going to keep it to just a simple metal material. So that is it for the hook material. So we can now click on the Christmas ball ornament and we can create the first material. So I'm going to click on new here to add a new material. So this first Christmas ornament, I'm going to rename to Ornament Bumpy. So this ornament is going to have kind of like some stripes which are bumping out, and they're going to start from the top and go down to the bottom. So to create that texture, I'm going to press Shift A. I will go to the search, and I'm going to search for the gradient texture. Let's just stick the gradient here, and then using the feature of the Node Wrangler add-on, I can hold down the Control and Shift key and then select different nodes, and that way we can preview the node on the object. Now I want to click on the linear here, and I want to change it instead to the radial. So right down here on the bottom, choose radial. And then also with the gradient texture selected, I'm going to press Control T, and that is going to add the texture coordinate and mapping nodes, and that's using the Node Wrangler add-on. Now we don't need the mapping node because the mapping node is just used to transform the texture. So I can just click on the mapping node and press X to delete it. Now I want to use the object coordinates, so let's put the object into the vector of the gradient texture. And then I can actually click on the hook object, and I'm going to press the H key to hide it just to get it out of the way. So now I can click back on the Christmas ornament. So you can see the gradient texture set to radial is going to start out as black, and then as it goes around, it's going to get brighter and brighter. And we have that line there, which is going all the way down to the bottom. Now I don't want there to be a super sharp edge. I want it to get darker and then get lighter. So to do this, I can press Shift A. I'm going to go here to the search, and I'm going to search for the math node, and let's put the math node after the gradient texture. And then I want to click on add here, and under rounding, I'm going to use the ping pong. So the ping pong is sort of going to act like a mirror, and it's going to ping pong the values to the other side. So you can now see that it goes down to fully black, and then it starts to get lighter, and then up here it is light. So that is the look that I'm going for. And so we can use this texture here to make the Christmas ornament actually have some parts which are bumping out. Now I don't want to add just one bump, I want to add a bunch of bumps all over. So what I'm going to do is select the ping pong, and I can press Shift D to duplicate it, and let's stick it before the first one. And instead of it being ping pong, I'm going to click here, and then I'm going to change this to multiply under functions. You can also just click right here, and then you can press the M key, and that'll change it to multiply. So we're going to use the multiply with this math node to multiply the values. So I can now turn this value up, and you can see that it's going to basically duplicate it and move it around. It's going to multiply those values. So I'm going to turn the value to 30 because I want 30 of those little lines there. And there we go. So we now have some lines which are going from the top down to the bottom. And so we can use this to make the Christmas ornament bumpy. So what I'm going to do is click and drag to box select these nodes, and then I can just like drag them down here. And so to actually make them popping out, I want to put this value into the displacement. So I can take the value and I'm going to put that into the displacement of the material output. And then I can also Control Shift and select the principled shader to preview it. Now you can see there's some weird shading issues and it's not actually working correctly, and that is because this is displacement data. You can see it's a purple dot, but then this is just black and white data because the value is a gray dot. So we need to convert this data into displacement data that the material output can use. So I'm going to press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the displacement, and let's put the displacement node here in between before the displacement. And then I can just like drag it down here. Now it's not actually working, and that is because we want to take the value and we want to put it into the height value instead, and this is going to convert it to displacement data. So now it does look pretty good, but if you actually look here on the side, you can see it's not actually displacing the mesh. And that is because there's one more setting that we need to turn on in the material settings. So I'm going to click and drag and open up the side panel here, and I'm going to click right down here to go to the material properties. And I can click on the arrows here to make this smaller. So on this ornament bumpy material, we want to open up the settings tab right here, and then we want to go to surface. And right here on the displacement, you can see it's set to bump only. So it is adding a fake bump, but it's not actually displacing the mesh. So we want to click on the displacement, and we want to instead change this to displacement and bump. And so this is telling the material that it can use the displacements. And so now if I Control Shift and select the ping pong, you can see that if the values are darker, they're going to go in, but if the values are lighter, they're going to actually be popping out. So I can Control Shift and select the principled shader. Now that is way too strong. The displacement is way too strong. So I'm going to turn the scale here to just like a 0.1, and that way it'll be much less strong. But now you can see it's actually displacing the mesh. And then if I go right up here to the base color, I'm just going to turn the base color to kind of like a gray color for now, just so that we can see it a bit better. Now if you look here closely, you can see that it's actually super sharp. It's super sharp when it goes in, and it's super sharp when it goes out. And so I don't want this to be super sharp, I want it to be kind of smooth. So to do this, I'm going to press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the RGB curves, and let's stick the RGB curves after the ping pong. And I can click and drag to box select these nodes and just bring them back a bit so we have a bit more space. So I can use these RGB curves to actually change the sharpness. So what I'm going to do is click right here in the center to add a dot, and I'm just going to bring that there. And then I can click right here on this dot, and I'm going to drag this dot down. And so basically the curve of the RGB curves is going to change how the geometry is actually being displaced. Because if I Control Shift and select the ping pong to preview it, you can see it's very sharp. But then if I Control Shift and select the RGB curves, you can see the RGB curves is changing how light and dark the values are. And so that is going to affect the displacement. So I can Control Shift and select the principled shader again. So I can now change this curve, and this curve here is actually going to change the curve of that bump. So I'm going to click right here, and I'm just going to drag this down because I don't want it to be quite as bumpy. I'm just going to drag it to about there. And then I'm also going to click right here to add another dot, and I'm going to drag this dot a little bit more down, and then I can click to add another dot here, and I can drag this dot about there. And I want whatever I do on this side to be about the same over on that side. So already now the part which is bumping out is smooth, but I also want the part here which is going in to be smooth as well. So to do this, I can drag this dot up just a little bit, and then I can also click on this dot here and drag this dot up a little bit. And that is going to help to make it more smooth. But it's still kind of going way down, it's getting super sharp, and basically this line here, when it ends here, it's going to start right over here. So we basically need it to be smooth right here on the edge. So to do this, I'm going to click to add another dot here. Now you can see that it's not really adding the dot, and that's because it's too close to this one. So what you can do is hold down the Control key and then click to add another dot, and I'm going to drag this over. And I'm trying to make this flat before it goes to the end. And if it's flat, then it's going to be more smooth. I can also go here to the other side and do the same thing. So I can hold down the Control key and click right there, and I can just kind of drag this down. And now that it's smooth right there and smooth over here on both sides, you can now see that it is completely smooth. So that is looking really nice. So you can continue to play around with this and just change it to how you like. Or if you want this to like come out more, you could also bring it way up, or you could like bring it way down. You could do a lot of things with this. So there we go. So we now have all those little bumps there, and that is looking very cool for a Christmas ornament. Now I also want to put this RGB curves into the normal to give it a little bit more fake bump and just make it a bit stronger. So let's take the color, and I can put that into the normal. Now we need to convert this to normal data, because just like with the displacement, this is displacement data, but then this here is a yellow dot, and so that is color data. So this normal, it is a purple dot, and so that is normal data. So we need a node in here to convert it to normal data. So I can press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I can search for the bump node, and let's drop the bump node here before it goes into the normal. And then we actually want the color to be going into the height value, so it converts it to normal data. And then it is really strong. You can see it looks kind of dark. So I'm just going to turn the strength way down to like a 0.1. So it is more subtle, but it will just help to define that shape a bit better. So now to make this look more like a Christmas ornament, I want to make it metallic. So let's turn the metallic value all the way to 1, so it is actually metal. And then also here on the base color, you can of course make this any color that you want, but I'm going to make this kind of like a bright red, not super saturated, but pretty saturated and maybe a bit darker. Now for the roughness, I want to add a cool little texture to make some parts more rough and other parts more shiny. So to do this, I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the Voronoi texture, and let's drop the Voronoi texture down here. And then I want to Control Shift and select the Voronoi to preview it, but I actually want to Control Shift and select the Voronoi again because I want to preview the color. And you can see the color values is going to give us all these little shapes. And then just like the other textures, I want to use the object coordinates. So let's put the object into the vector. And then I do want to turn the scale way up because I want to make those shapes much smaller. So let's turn the scale to like 250. So now if you zoom in closely, you can see we have all these little shapes there. So I want this to control the roughness so that some parts are more rough and other parts are more shiny. So I can take the color and let's put that into the roughness value of the principled shader, and I can Control Shift and select the principled shader. So now you can see that some parts are more rough whereas other parts are more shiny. But I want to control this better because some parts are like very rough and then other parts are super shiny like a mirror. So I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for a color ramp to control the color values. And let's put the color ramp before the roughness. So if I make the values darker, they are going to be more shiny. You can see if I take this white tab right here, and if I make it very dark, it's going to be super reflective. Whereas if I turn them up, it's going to be more rough. So because this is a Christmas ornament, I do want it to be pretty reflective. So I'm going to turn this down a bit, but then I can also click on the black tab here, and I'm going to turn this up a bit. So you can really just play around with these two color values to get it to the amount of roughness that I want. So I do want it to be pretty shiny, but I do want some parts here and there to be a bit more rough. So something like that is pretty good. So I can now press Alt H, and Alt H is going to unhide the other objects. And so there we go. We have the first Christmas ornament. And then there is one thing that I want to do. I think that this hook should be a little bit smaller. So I'm going to select the hook object and I'll scale it down just a little bit and maybe bring it down a little bit on the Z axis so it's not quite as big. But there we go, there is the first Christmas ornament. So I'll press Ctrl S to save, and I now want to duplicate this and make another one. So I'm going to press 1 on the numpad to go to front view. And then I can select this object and hold down the Shift key and select the other object, and I'm going to zoom out, and then I can press Shift D to duplicate, and let's hit X to bring it over on the X axis, and I can stick it there. So I now want to duplicate this material so that it is separate, and then we can change it. So with this object selected, I'm going to click on this icon right here. It kind of looks like two pieces of paper, and that's going to duplicate the material but keep the same data. And then I can just rename the material. So this ornament I'm going to rename to random color. So now that it is a separate material, I can change the nodes and it's not going to affect the other Christmas ornament. So what I'm going to do is click and drag just to box select all these nodes, and then I can either press the X key or click on the delete key and that'll delete it. I can also click on the displacement here and press the X key to delete it. So for this one, I want to start by putting a noise texture into the roughness to make some parts more rough and other parts more shiny. So I'll press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the noise texture. Let's stick the noise texture down here, and then with the noise texture selected, I can press Ctrl T, and that is going to add the texture coordinate and mapping. Now we don't need the mapping node, so I can click on the mapping and press X to delete it. And then let's take the object and I'm going to put that into the vector of the noise texture. And then I can Control Shift and select the noise texture to preview it. And the object coordinates is going to place the texture on the object more evenly. So I now want to change some of the settings to make it more detailed. So let's turn the scale up to like a 15 on the noise texture. And also on the detail here, I'm going to turn that to like a 15 as well, so it's very detailed. And then I do want to make it more rough, so let's turn the roughness up to like a 0.8. I think 0.8 is pretty good. So I can now take the factor and I'm going to put the factor into the roughness. So the lighter and darker values are going to control how rough and shiny the object is. And then I can Control Shift and select the principled shader. Now that is actually a bit too rough, and so I want to control this better. So I can press Shift A, Let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the color ramp, and let's put the color ramp in between the noise texture and the principled shader. And so I can now change the values to make it more shiny. So if the values are darker, they're going to be more reflective. So I'm going to click on this white tab right here, and I'm going to turn this down a bit so it's a bit more reflective. But I can also click on the black tab here, and I can turn the black tab up, and that's going to make everything a little bit more rough. So I'm just going to turn it up to something like that. Maybe just turn it up a little bit more. And then also the metallic value, we need to turn the metallic value all the way to 1 so it is a metal material. So now I want to add the random colors. So I'm going to be adding a node which will generate a random color each time I duplicate the object. So I can press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the object info node, and let's stick the object info node right here. And then we want to take the random, and let's put the random into the base color. So what the random value will do is it will randomly generate colors from white to black between each object. So if I click on this object here and I press Shift D to duplicate it, you can see this object is a bit darker, and if I continue to duplicate these, they're all going to be random values from white to black. Now I don't want them to be white and black, I want to make them Christmas colors. So to change the colors, I can click on this color ramp, and I can press Shift D to duplicate it, and I can just drop the color ramp right up here. So I can now make all the colors that I want here in the color ramp, and that'll change the colors of the Christmas ornaments. So what I can do is actually hold down the Control key, and I can just like click in here to make a bunch of different tabs. And then I want the colors to be consistent. I don't want there to be any blending. So I can click on the linear here, and I'm going to change this to the constant instead. And so now I can change all the colors here, and that's going to change each color of the ornament. So I'm going to click on this first one here, and I'm just going to make this fully white. And then I will bring this over a bit and kind of bring these back. Let's click on the next one here, and this one I'm going to make like a green color, maybe a bit brighter. You can of course make any color that you want. And then also here on this one I'm going to make kind of like a bright red color, but not too saturated, something like that. Let's also click on this one here, and this one I want to make kind of like a bright purple color, so something like that. Click on the next one here, and this one I want to make like a blue color, so let's make it kind of like a bright blue. And then let's click on this one here, and this one I'm actually going to get rid of it, so I'll click on the minus here to get rid of that tab. And then the last one here, I can click on this one, and this one I'm going to make like a really bright color, and I'm going to make it kind of like a yellowish gold color. So I can now drag these around, and the larger the color is, there's going to be more of a chance that it will be that color. So I'm actually just going to drag these around, and I want this first one here to actually be yellow. So I'm going to drag the yellow over here, and then I can kind of drag these around, and I want to pretty evenly space these. So I'm just going to eyeball it and just kind of evenly space these. So something like that. So now if you select the objects and press Shift D to duplicate them, you can see every time I duplicate it, it's going to randomly be a different color. So I'm just going to press B for the box select, just box select all these extra ones here that I don't need, and I can press X and then click on delete. So there we go, that is it for the random color Christmas ornament. Let's press Control S again to save. All right, let's do the next Christmas ornament. So I will select this object here, hold down the Shift key and select the other object, and I want to duplicate these and move them over. So I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate, and we can bring this over on the X-axis and stick that there. And then I'm going to select the ornament, and I want to duplicate the material so that it is separate. So let's click on this button here. That'll duplicate the material but keep the same data. And then I can just rename this. And I'm going to rename this one to Ornament Diamond. And then I can just click and drag to box select these nodes, and I can press X to delete them. And then of course make sure the metallic value is turned up to 1 so that it is metal and shiny. So for this material, I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for a Voronoi texture, and we're going to use the Voronoi texture to create a diamond texture. And then I can Control Shift and select the Voronoi texture to preview it. And then also with the Voronoi texture selected, I'm going to press Control T, and that's going to add the texture coordinate and mapping, but we don't need the mapping, so I can select it and press X to delete it. And then we want to use the object coordinates, so let's put the object into the vector so that it will place the texture on the object more evenly. And then also right here on the F1, I want to instead change this to F2. And you can see that now it's going to be more sharp. And then let's also click on this bottom setting down here, and I'm going to change this to the Manhattan. And so we're going to use this texture to make it look like little diamond shapes. Now you can't really see it very well, so I want to make it more contrasty. So we can press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the color ramp, and let's put the color ramp right here after the Voronoi. And then I can drag these two tabs together, and that's going to make it more contrasty. So I'm going to drag the black tab very close over here to the white tab so you can see that better. Now it's looking kind of random right now, and that is because there's this randomness value on the Voronoi. So I can turn the randomness value to 0, and now we have this really cool texture with these little diamond shapes. And you can play around with the scale if you want to change that. I'm going to leave it at 5 because I think that looks pretty good. And you can also change the size of the diamonds by dragging these values. And then let's also change the colors. So I actually want the black tab to be white. So if I click on the black color here, I want to make this fully white. And then this white one right over here, I'm going to make this a blue color. So let's make it blue and a bit darker. And I actually want it to be a slightly purplish blue. And then I want to drag these pretty close to each other. So something like that. So then I can Control Shift and select the principled shader to preview it, and I want to put the color into the base color, and there we go, that is looking super cool. And then also I want to put it into the normal to give it some bump to make the diamonds look like they have some bump. So let's put the color into the normal of the principled shader. And then just like the other materials, we need to convert the color data into normal data. So I can press Shift A. Let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the bump node, and I can put the bump node after the color ramp before the bump. And then to actually convert it to normal data, we want to put it into the height value. So the color ramp color needs to go into the height. And now if you zoom in there, you can see that it is looking like it is bumping out. Now I want to actually make it pop in. You can have it pop out if you want, but I want to have it bump in. So I'm going to click on the invert button, and that way the diamonds look like they're going in. And then I'm also going to take the strength here, and I'll just turn that to like a 0.3 so it's not quite as strong. But now the diamonds look like they're popping in a little bit, and that is looking really nice. Now I also want to give some variation into the roughness because I don't want a single roughness value. I want some parts to be more rough and other parts to be less rough. So let's press Shift A, I can go to the search, and for this I'm just going to add a noise texture. Let's put the noise texture underneath the Voronoi, and I can Control Shift and select the noise texture to preview it. And then to place the texture on the object more evenly, let's put the object into the vector. And then right here on the scale, I want to turn this up to like a 15 so it is much more detailed. And let's also turn the detail here to all the way to the max of 15. And then also I do want to add more roughness, so let's turn the roughness to a 0.8, and now you can see it looks much more detailed. So I can now take the factor, and let's put the factor into the roughness. And so these light and dark values are going to control how rough and shiny the object is. And I can Control Shift and select the principled shader. Now it still looks much too rough, so to have more control over it, I'm going to change the colors. So I'm going to click on this color ramp here, and I can press Shift D to duplicate, and let's put this color ramp right here after the noise texture before it goes into the roughness. And then I can hit the backspace, and that is going to reset the color ramp. So then if I make the values darker, they're going to be more shiny. So I can click on the white tab here, and I can make this much darker, and you can see it's now going to be much more reflective. And then if I click on the black tab here, if I turn the black tab up, everything's going to be a bit more rough. So I'll bring the darker tab to about here, and then I will also make the lighter tab a bit lighter. So there we go. We now have a really cool diamond texture. So we can now create the next one, and the next one is going to be the most complex one, and that is going to be the snowflake. So we're going to be creating a procedural snowflake texture. So I can press 1 on the numpad to go to front view. Let's also press Ctrl S to save, and then I can box select these two objects, and I can press Shift D to duplicate, and let's bring it over on the x-axis and just stick it there. And then I can zoom in, and then just select the ornament, and then I can click on this button right here, and that's going to duplicate the material but keep the same data. And then this one I can rename to Ornament Snowflake. And then I can just box select all of these nodes here, and I can press X to delete them. And then of course make sure that the metallic value is turned to 1, and we can now create the snowflake. So to do this, I first want to create one of the spikes of the snowflake. So I'm going to press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the gradient texture, and let's bring the gradient over here. And then with the gradient texture selected, I can press Control T, that's going to add the texture coordinate and mapping, but we don't need the mapping, so I can just select it and press X to delete it. And then let's plug the object up to the vector of the gradient texture. And then I can Control Shift and select the gradient texture to preview it. Now I don't just want to have a linear gradient, so I'm going to click on the type and I'm going to change it to radial. So this way, if I kind of go up here to the top, you can see there's a line here and it starts out as black and then it goes around and it gets lighter and lighter. So this line here, this is going to be where that little spike is on the snowflake. Now I don't want it to be up here, I want the texture to be on the front, so I'm going to hit R to rotate. Let's rotate this on the x-axis, and then I can type in 90 and enter, just to rotate that down, so now we can see it from the front. Now I don't want it to be really sharp right here, I want it to get darker and then get lighter. So to do this, I can press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the math node, and let's put the math node right here, so the color can go into the top value of the math node. And then I want to click on the add, and right here under rounding, I'm going to choose the ping pong. So this way, it's still going to have that gradient, but it's going to get darker, and then it's going to get lighter, and it'll be the lightest over here and the darkest over here. Now for this snowflake, I want to have 6 of those little spikes, so I need to multiply this dark value here, this dark little line, and move it over. So I'm going to click on the ping pong, and I can press Shift D to duplicate it and drop it here. So we now have another math node. And then this math node, I'm going to click on this to change it, and you can change it to multiply under functions. You can also just click on this, and then you can press the M key, and that'll change it to multiply. So I can now turn the value up, and you can see it's going to multiply it, and so now we can just add as many of those lines as you want. So if you want a very detailed snowflake, you can turn this way up, but I'm just going to turn this to like a 6, and that way there's just going to be 6 of them, and that is very classic for a snowflake. So those dark lines there are going to be the spikes of the snowflake. Now you can see that the snowflake lines go all the way over to the other side, and I just want to be able to see them on the front. So I'm going to create a circle here, and then we're going to tell these dark lines that they're only going to be where the circle is. So to do this, I can press Shift A, I can go to the search, and I'm going to search for the vector math node, and let's put the vector math node here underneath the multiply. And then I want to use the object coordinates, so let's take the object from the texture coordinate, and I can put that into the vector, and I'm also going to Control Shift and select the add here, the vector math. Now to make a circle texture, I'm going to click on the add here, and I'm going to instead change it to length. So it's right down here, choose length. And then Control Shift and select the length to preview it. Now you can't really see it, and that is because this is a circle object, so we actually need to bring the values forward so that you can see them on the front of this circle. So to do that, I can press Shift A, I can go to the search, and I'm going to search for the mapping node, and let's put the mapping node here in between the object and the length. And then right here on this Z value, we can just bring this forward. We're actually going to bring it back, and then you'll be able to see that circle. So on the location Z, I'm going to type in -1. And if you Control Shift and select the length, you can now see that there's a circle there. So now I want to tell the ping pong that it's only going to be where the length is, where that circle is. So I can select the ping pong, and I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate it, and let's stick it right here. And I can also click and drag and box select these nodes, and I can bring them back. And then I want the length to be going into the top one, and then I want to take the ping pong and I want to put that into the bottom one. Now I don't want to use ping pong, so I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to instead change this to less than on the comparison. So this way, by changing it to less than, this texture is only going to be where the length is. So now you can see that we have that little star shape, or it kind of looks like a flower, and it's on the front. Now I want to be able to change the shape of this to make it look more like a snowflake. So to do that, I can press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the RGB curves, and we're going to stick the RGB curves after the ping pong. And I can kind of drag this back. So I can now use the RGB curves and I can drag this around, and that'll actually change the shape of kind of like those petal shapes. So we can use this to create the shape of the snowflake. Now I do also want to make it a bit stronger. So what I'm going to do is click on this multiply right here, and I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate it, and let's stick it after the ping pong. And so we're just going to multiply the values to make them a bit stronger, and I'm going to turn the value to 2. That way it'll just be a bit stronger, and it'll make it a bit easier to control the RGB curves. So I'm now going to make the shape of the snowflake. So I'm going to start by clicking on this dot here, and I'm going to drag this dot way down and bring it there, and that way it's not quite as far up. And also on all of these dots, I want it to be very straight, so I don't want it to curve. So on all these dots, you can click right here to change it to the vector handle. So click on a dot here, change it to the vector handle, and also this one right here, change it to the vector handle. Now this one right over here, I actually want to drag it up, so I'm going to bring it up to about there. And then this one right here, I'm going to drag it down a bit. And we're basically going to create that shape of the snowflake. So I'm actually going to bring this up a little bit higher, and then I'm going to drag this down. And so you can see this little point right here is creating that little spike there on the snowflake. So I'm going to drag this up a bit more, kind of like to there. And then what I can do is click right here to add another dot, and I can again change the vector handle. So I'm going to change it to the sharp one, and then I can drag this down. And then I can kind of play around with this shape here. So this one right here, that is going to be kind of like that sharp bit right there. And then this down to here, that is going to be this part right here. Then this one, which is going up, that's going to be the little spike, which is kind of in between those areas. And this spike, I want it to be quite a bit smaller. So let's drag this down so it's much smaller. And already you can see this is really starting to look like a snowflake. Now I want to have another little spike just to give it a bit more detail. So I'm going to click right here to add another one, and let's change this to the vector, and then I can drag it back a little bit. And so I'm going to drag it to about here, and then this one is going to be kind of about here. So then right in here, in between these two, we can add another one. So I'm going to click right there to add another one. And if for some reason you can't add it, if I press X to delete this, what you can do is you can hold down the Control key and then click, and that will add another one there in the center. And then again, we can click right here to make it vector. And so now I want to kind of spike this up and kind of spike it over to the side. And so that's going to create a little kind of icy detail, kind of make it look like it's spiky. And you can of course continue to play around with this. You can make it bigger or smaller. You could add more details by adding these kind of little spikes. So you can totally play around with this more. I might even bring this down a little bit. That's a bit better. So you can continue to play around with this to make really any shape you want, but this is the shape that I'm going to go for. So if you want to make the same shape, you can copy this. You can also play around with this factor value, and the factor value will kind of change how that is looking. So the factor is going to control how much of the RGB curves is actually controlling the shape. You could also change the multiply. So if you want to make it stronger or less strong, you could kind of play around with that. So that looks pretty cool. And you could also change the ping pong if you want to make there be more of them. So if you want to have like many more, you could kind of drag this, or you could also drag this multiply. This one's actually better than moving the ping pong. I would probably leave the ping pong how it is and instead change the first value. So if you want to have a very detailed snowflake, you could turn this way up, or you could turn it way down. So really just play around with this and get it how you like. So there we go, there is the snowflake shape. Now I do want to have another little circle in here, which is kind of going to be like a little hole. So I want to make a little black area in the center. So what I'm first going to do is join all of these nodes together into a frame. So what I can do is click and drag just to box select all these nodes here. And then I can press Control J. And Control J will join them together into a frame. And you don't have to do this, but it's just a nice way to organize the nodes. Let's also press Control S to save the Blender file. So now what I want to do is duplicate the same node setup, and then we can just adjust it to make a little circle in here. And then we can simply just join the two colors together. So I'm going to click and drag to box select all the nodes and the frame, and then I can press Control Shift D. So Control Shift D is going to duplicate the nodes, but it'll keep the wires plugged up. And then to preview it, I can just Control Shift and select this less than. So we can now just play around with these values, and we're going to make a little circle. So what I'm going to do is click on the RGB curves, and I can press the backspace, and that's going to reset it. I'm now going to drag this way down, make it really small, and then right down here, I'm going to drag this up a little bit to make it a bit bigger. And you can see if they're actually at the same spot, it kind of looks like a circle, but I don't want that. I want it to kind of look like a star shape. But then what I can do to make it kind of go back down a bit is I can add another dot here in the center, and I can just drag this dot down. So you can play around with this, something like that. And that's really it. So I'm basically just trying to create a little star shape. So this one is kind of right up here, then this one kind of goes down a little bit. You can kind of play around with that. And then this one here, I'm just gonna kind of make it like that. So something like that, just play around with those values. Of course, you could make this whatever you want. You could make it super detailed and super spiky by adding in more of these dots, but I'm just gonna go with a little simple star. And of course, if you wanted to, you could change this multiply to make there be more spikes or less spikes. So I now just want to join both of these together, because if you Control Shift and select both of the less thans, we have the snowflake and then we have the hole. So I can just join them together with another math node. So I can press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I can add another math node, and let's put the math node in between both of these. And then if I click here to change this, under the comparison, I'm just going to change this to less than. And then the value can go here, and then the other value can go here. And I can Control Shift and select the math node, and you can see it's adding them both together. So now we have that little hole there. So that is really great. So we can now take the principled shader and we can put the value into the base color. And then I can Control Shift and select the principled shader to preview it. And also make sure that the metallic value is turned to 1, so it is a metal material. Now I don't just want it to be white and black, I want to change the colors. So to change the colors, I can press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I can search for a color ramp, and let's put the color ramp in between the less than and the principled shader. And then also right here on the linear, I want to change this to constant so that there isn't any blending, it'll just be constant. And I can just drag this out so I can see it a bit better. So we can now just change these colors to change the colors of the ornament. So I can click on this black tab here, and this one I'm just going to make like a very bright color, and I'm going to make it like a bright blue. And I think blue is really good because those are kind of icy colors, so white and blue. All right, now I also want this texture to control the roughness because I actually want the blue part to be more shiny. So let's take the value here from the less than, and I can put that into the roughness. So now you can see that they actually have different types of roughness because the black and white values are controlling how rough or shiny it is. Now I want to control that better because that is like super shiny. So I can click on this color ramp and I can press Shift D to duplicate it, and let's drop it right here before the roughness. And then I can just make the colors lighter or darker to change the roughness. So I'm going to click right here on the blue color, and I'm going to click on the RGB, and I'm going to drag all of the RGB values all the way to 1, and that way it is white. And then I can just turn it down. So if the colors are darker, it's going to be more shiny, but if they're lighter, it's going to be more rough. So I'm just going to make this like a gray color, something like that. And then this white tab right here, I'm going to make this a little bit darker so that the snowflake is a little bit shiny, but I do want it to be a bit more rough. So something like that is really great. And then I do also want to put this into the normal to give it a little bit of bump. So let's take the value and I can put this into the normal. And then to convert it to normal data, we need to press Shift A. Let's go to the search, and I can search for the bump node, and let's put the bump node here right before the normal. And then the less than can actually go into the height value, and that way it'll convert it to normal data. So it is going to be very subtle, but if you zoom in here to the edges, you can see it does just look like it's bumping out a little bit. So it does look pretty nice. And there we have it. So there is the snowflake ornament. So now I'm going to be adding in the glitter one. So I'm going to press 1 on the numpad to go to front view. I can click and drag to box select these 2 objects here. Let's also press Control S to save. And we've already created 4 of them, so we have a 5th one now. So I'll press Shift D to duplicate, and you can click and drag with your mouse wheel to bring it over on the X-axis and place it there. And then we're going to be appending in the procedural glitter material that I created. So what you can do is just click on the X here to get rid of this material. So if you haven't done my procedural procedural glitter material, then you can check out the procedural glitter material with the link in the description, and you can do that tutorial, and then I'll show you how to append in that material into this Blender file. Or if you'd like to help support this channel, you can also purchase the procedural glitter on my Gumroad store, and you can also get it on my Patreon page. So links will be in the description if you'd like to purchase the project files. So I'm now going to be appending in the material. So what you can do is you can click on File, and then you can go right down here and click on Append. So here is my procedural glitter material, so you can go ahead and do that tutorial, or you can also purchase the project files and you will get the glitter blender file. So I'm going to go inside the procedural glitter material blender file, and then I just want to append in the material. So we can click right here to go into the material folder, and then we can just double click on the procedural glitter. So then if I just select this object right here, I can click on the drop down and I can click on the procedural glitter. And there we go. So we now have a glitter Christmas ornament. We can also rename this to Ornament Glitter. And then of course, if you wanted to, you could change the glitter color. So in the glitter tutorial, we created this custom node, and you can just drag these into the base color to change it to any color that you want. I'm just going to keep it at the original for now. So let's press Ctrl S to save, and you can see we've already created half of the ornaments. Alright, so let's create the next Christmas ornament. So I'm going to select this object here and then hold down the Shift key and select the other object, and I can press Shift D to duplicate, and let's bring it down on the Z axis and stick it there. And then I can also bring it over, and I can click with my mouse wheel to constrain it to the X axis, and I'm going to bring it there and bring it down on the Z axis a little bit more. And then you can just select this Christmas ornament right here, and we want to just duplicate the material. So right up here on the ornament glitter here, we just want to click on this button, and this is going to duplicate the material but keep the same information. And then right here on the ornament glitter, I want to rename this to Ornament Swirl, because this one is going to have a swirl texture. And then what I can do is click and drag and just box select all these nodes, and I can press X to delete. So then for this material, turn the metallic value all the way up to 1 so that it is a metal material, and it will be more shiny. So to make that swirl texture, I want to first add a gradient. So I'm going to press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the gradient texture, and let's stick this down here. And then I can Control Shift and select the gradient texture to preview it. And also with the gradient texture selected, you can press Ctrl T, and that will add the texture coordinate and mapping. Now I don't need the mapping node, so I can just press X to delete it. And let's plug the object up to the vector. And then I don't just want to have a gradient right here, I instead want it to be going around in a circle. So let's click on the linear here, and I can change it to radial. So the gradient type will be radial. And then also this was rotated over, and that's because this object here, we rotated that over. So what I need to do is actually just rotate it back. So what you can do with this object selected is press Alt R, that will clear the rotation. It was just rotated over because this object here, I rotated it over for the snowflake. So let's go back to this object, and you can see right here on the top that it starts out as black and then it goes all the way around and it turns to white. But I don't want it to be sharp here, I want it to turn black and then get lighter again slowly. So I'm going to press Shift A, I'm going to go to the search, and I'm going to search for the math node, and let's put the math node after the gradient. And then we can change the type, and under rounding, I'm going to change it to the ping pong. So this way, it'll be light over here, then it gets darker and darker, and then it's black here, and then it gets lighter. Now I don't just want to have one of these dark areas, I want to make these dark areas be all around the ornament. So to do this, I can click on the ping pong, and I can press Shift D to duplicate it, and let's drop it here, and we're just going to put it here before the first one. And then this one I want to change the type, so let's click on the ping pong, and then you can hit the M key, and that will change it to the multiply, or it's right here under functions. And so we can use this to multiply the dark values. So if I now drag this out, you can see it's multiplying that texture there that we made, the gradient texture, and so we're going to have a bunch of those lines. And so that is exactly what I want, and so then we'll just need to distort these lines to make them so they're wobbly. Now I'm going to turn the value to 12, and that way there's going to be 12 of these little lines. You can of course change this to whatever you want. I think 12 looks pretty good. So this is looking pretty cool, but I want to distort it because I want it to be wavy and swirly. So to distort it, I'm going to press Shift A, I'm going to go to the search and I'm going to search for the wave texture, and let's stick the wave texture here under the gradient. And then I can Control Shift and select the wave texture to preview it. And also I can use the object coordinates, so let's put the object into the vector. Now I want to create one black line here in the center, which is going to distort it. So let's click on the X here and I can change it to Z, and that way the lines are going back and forth. And then right here on the scale, I'm going to turn this way down to just like a 0.2. So now you can see it's black in the center, but then it gets lighter as it goes up. And so we can use the black values to distort it more and more. So where it's white, it won't be distorted at all, but then where it's black, it'll be more distorted. So to do this, I'm going to just click and drag to box select these nodes, and I can bring them over a bit. And I'm going to press Shift A. I'm going to go here to the search, and I'm going to search for the Mix RGB, and we want to put the Mix RGB in between these two math nodes. So just stick it right there. And then I want the wave texture to be going into color 2, and the multiply is going to be going into color 1. So I can Control Shift and select the ping pong to preview it. And then also on the mix here, I want to click on this, and I'm going to instead change it to the linear light because that works better in this case. So now if I drag the factor is going to have more control over it. So if the factor is set to 0, it's just using color 1, and color 1 is having no distortion. But if I turn the factor up more and more, that is going to have the wave texture distort it more and more, so it'll be stronger. So I am going to turn the factor to just like a 0.4. I think 0.4 is pretty good. So if you Control Shift and select the wave texture, you can see where it's darker, it's going to be distorting it more, but then where it's white, it isn't distorting it at all. So that's why as it goes over here into the center, it gets distorted and then it goes back. And you could of course change the scale. You could also like change the distortion if you want to be more random, and just change some of these other values. But I'm just going to leave it as a simple swirl. So it's going to swirl over here and then kind of swirl back. So I now want to put these white and black values into the displacement to have it actually bump out the mesh. So I'm going to take the value here from the ping pong, and let's put that into the displacement. And I can Control Shift and select the principled shader. Now, one really important thing, you need to open up this side tab right here, and under settings on the surface right here, this is on the material properties, the settings surface, we want to set the displacement here to displacement and bump. And this is going to tell the material that it can use the displacement. So I can just make this smaller. Now you can see it's not really working correctly. It's all distorted. And that is because this is black and white data, but then this is displacement data. So we need a node in here to convert it to displacement data. So I'll press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I can search for the displacement node, and we want to put the displacement here in between the ping pong and the displacement, and I can just like drag it down here. And then I actually want the value to be going into the height of the displacement, and this will convert it to proper displacement data. I could also like box select these and maybe just like bring them down a little bit. So now you can see it's way too strong. So to make it less strong, we can turn the scale down. So I'm going to turn the scale just to like a 0.15. I think 0.15 is pretty good. So if I Control Shift and select the ping pong, you can see where the values are lighter, it's going to be popping out, but where the values are darker, it's going to go back in. So I can Control Shift and select the principled shader. Now there is a problem with this. I don't like how sharp it is. You could keep it that sharp if you want to, but I want to round out the edges. And so to do that, I need to make this value here smoother. So I'm going to press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I can search for the RGB curves, and let's stick the RGB curves here after the ping pong. I can drag this over so we have a bit more space. So now what I can do is I can click in here to add a dot, and I can also click on this dot and I can drag it down. And so basically this shape here from the RGB curves is going to be the same shape as those little parts which are popping out. So I'm going to drag this a bit more down. I don't want that to be quite as strong. So something like that, maybe bring that a bit down. And why this is happening is because if I Control Shift and select the RGB curves is actually changing how bright and dark the values are. You can see if I Control Shift select the ping pong, they're very sharp, but if I Control Shift and select the RGB curves, it is much smoother now. So I'll just Control Shift and select the principled shader. I could also take the base color and just turn that a bit darker so it's a bit easier to see, and maybe turn the roughness down for now so it's a bit easier to see. So now I'm just going to change the shape here. So I'm going to add another dot here, maybe bring that down a bit so it's a bit sharper, add another dot here, maybe bring that down a little bit. I can also click to add another dot there, bring that down, and then click to add another dot there and bring that down. But you can see right here when it goes down in the crevices, it's super sharp, and that's because when this goes down here, it starts over at the next one. So this is sort of like how it is tiling. So this is really sharp down here on both edges. So what I can do is drag these dots up just a little bit. They don't need to be up that much, but just dragging them up a little bit will make that more smooth. And what I also need to do is hold down the control key and click right there to add another one, and I need to make that flat, and then also hold down the control key and add another one there. So you can just hold down the control key and click to add dots. So I'm going to drag another one there, something like that. And so now that these are flat here in both corners, you can see that is much more smooth. And so that is looking really great. You can also drag this factor if you want to make it have less control. So if you want to make the RGB curves more subtle, you could turn that down, or you could turn the factor up if you want to be more strong. Now I also want to put this into the normal to give it some bump. So let's take the color and put that into the normal. And then we need to convert it to normal data because this is a purple dot, which is normal data. So we need to convert the color data into normal data. So I can press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I can search for the bump node, and let's put the bump node here after the RGB curves. And then to convert it to normal data, we want the color to be going into the height value. So now that is like really strong, so let's make it less strong. So I'm just going to turn the strength to like a 0.3, so that is much better. And then let's also change the color of the shader. So right up here on the base color, you can of course use any color you want. I'm going to use like a bright pink color. And I think I'll make this a little bit more towards the blue, so it's kind of like a purplish color. Because if it's more blue, it'll be more purple. So something like that. So we now have a really cool purple ornament. Now there is just one more thing that I want to add, and that is a little bit of variation in the roughness. So I'm going to make a texture, and we're going to put the texture into the roughness. So I'll press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the Voronoi texture. Let's drop the Voronoi down here, and I can put the object into the vector so it's placed on the object more evenly. And then I can Control Shift and select the Voronoi, and I'm actually going to Control Shift and select the Voronoi twice so we can preview the color. And so now that color value is giving us all these little shapes here. Now I want to make this much more detailed, so let's turn the scale way up to like a 200, and that way now if I zoom in you can see there's just some little colors there. So I can now take the color from the Voronoi and let's put that into the roughness of the principled shader. And I can Control Shift and select the principled shader. So now you can see it's controlling the roughness, so depending on how light or dark the values are, it's going to be more rough or shiny. But I want to control that better because some parts are super rough, so let's press Shift A, and I can go to the search, and I can search for the color ramp node, and let's put the color ramp right here before the roughness. So if I make the colors darker, it's going to be more shiny. So if I click on the white tab here, and if I make it darker, you can see it's going to be more reflective. So I'm going to make this kind of like a light gray, something like that. And then also on this black tab, I'm going to make this a bit brighter so everything is a bit more rough. So something like that, you can just play around with those values, but that looks pretty good. So there we go, there is the ornament swirl, and I do think that looks really nice. All right, so the next ornament that I'm gonna make is a very shiny ornament. So I'm going to select the hook and then hold down the Shift key and select the ornament. And I can press Shift D to duplicate, click and drag with your mouse wheel to bring it over on the x-axis and stick it here. And then I want to duplicate this material so it doesn't affect the other material. So I can click on this button right here and that is going to duplicate it. And then this one I'm going to rename to Ornament Reflective Random Color because it's going to be very reflective, but then it's also going to have a random color. So then what I can do is just click and drag to box select all these nodes and press X to delete them. So I first want to make this very shiny, but I do want there to be a little bit of variation in how rough and shiny it is. So I can press Shift A, I can go to the search, and I'm going to search for the noise texture, and let's stick the noise texture right here. And then with the noise texture selected, I can press Control T, and that will add the texture coordinate and mapping. And I want to use the object coordinate, so let's put the object into the vector, and we don't need the mapping, so I can just select the mapping and press X to delete it. And let's Control Shift and select the noise texture to see what it's looking like. So I want to make it more detailed, so let's turn the scale up to like a 20. I'm also going to turn the detail all the way to the max of 15, and I'll also turn the roughness up to like a 0.8. So now it is very detailed. So we can make these lighter and darker values control how rough and shiny it is. So let's put the factor into the roughness, and then I can control shift and select the principled shader. Now I want to have more control over this because it's actually pretty rough right now. So let's press Shift A. I can go to the search, and I'm going to search for the color ramp, and let's stick the color ramp in between the noise texture and the roughness. So then if the values are darker, they're going to be more shiny. So I'm going to click on this black tab, and I'm going to drag this way down so that it is very reflective. And I want to make this even more reflective, so I'll bring it way down to something maybe like that. And then I can click on this black tab, and this black tab I think I'll just turn up a little bit so everything is a little bit more rough. So now if I zoom in here, you can see it's super shiny, it's super reflective, and it almost looks like a mirror, but it is a little bit blurry. And also if you kind of look closely, you can see there's kind of like a little bit of random noise because the noise texture is controlling the roughness. Now I also want to have it be a randomly different color every time I duplicate it. So to do that, I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the object info, and let's put the object info right here. And then we can put the random value into the base color. So what the random value will do is it'll randomly generate colors from white to black, and every time you duplicate the object, it's going to be a random different color. So just to show you, if I select this object, I can press Shift D to duplicate it, and if I continue to press Shift D to duplicate it, you can see each one of these ornaments are a random color from white to black. Now to make the colors different colors, I can click on the color ramp, and I can press Shift D to duplicate it, and let's stick it right in here. So now we can change the colors of the color ramp to make all the colors that we want. So I'm going to hold down the Control key and just click a few times here to make some different tabs. And then also you can see that there is like some blending. There's some even blending between the two colors. So to make it so there's not an even blend, I'm going to click on the linear here, and I'm going to instead change it to constant. And this way they're all going to be constant colors. So I can now make all the colors. So I'm going to click on this first one here, and this one I'm going to make kind of like a bright red color, something like that. This next one here, I'm going to make this one kind of like a bright green, something like that. It's pretty cool. And this next one here, I'm just going to make this one kind of like a purple color. You could do some different like complementary colors, colors that go well together, or you could do just Christmas colors, or you could just do a mix of colors. This next one here, I'm going to make like yellow. So let's make this a bit brighter. Make it kind of a yellow color. And then this one here, let's make this like a blue color. So I'll make it blue, kind of like that. And then this one here, let's also do like an orange one. I think orange is pretty cool. So I'll make this like an orange color. So there we go. So you can see if I press Shift D to duplicate and duplicate these, they're just going to randomly be different colors. So if you are adding this to maybe like a Christmas tree or just adding this to some kind of scene, whenever you duplicate it, it'll randomly be a different color. I'm just going to click and drag to box select all these objects, and I will press X and delete, because I don't really want them. I just want to use this one. And also one thing that I want to do is I want to make sure all of these colors are fully white. So if you click right here, you can click on the color and you can scroll with your scroll wheel. And I'm just going to make sure they're all fully bright because if they're a bit dark, if I turn this down, it's kind of hard to see the reflection. So I do want to make sure all of these are fully white. You could even make them a little bit less saturated if you want to make them a bit brighter. So something like that is pretty good. And then you can also drag this around, and I actually want to flip these two because I want to be able to see the green one. I think green is pretty good. Let's also make this green a bit more saturated, so something like that. And then also, of course, just make sure you turn the metallic value all the way up to 1 so it is treated as a metallic material. I always like to mention that because I know there might be some people watching who are just skipping ahead and just doing whichever Christmas ornament they want to make. So just make sure you make the metallic value to 1. So the next ornament that I'm going to be creating is the peppermint candy or the peppermint swirl. So I'm going to press the 1 on the numpad to go to front view. I can select these two objects here, and I can press Shift D to duplicate. I can click and drag with my mouse wheel to bring it over on the x-axis and stick it there. Let's also press Control S to save. And then if I select this sphere right here, I want to duplicate this to make it a separate material. So I can click on this button right up here to duplicate the material. and then I can just rename this material. So I'm going to rename it to Ornament Peppermint. And then you can just click and drag to box select these nodes, and I can press X to delete. So then make sure that you turn the metallic value all the way to 1 so that it is a metal material. So to create the peppermint swirl, I'm going to start off by pressing Shift A. I'm going to go to the search, and I'm going to search for a gradient texture, and let's stick the gradient down here. And then I want to Control Shift and select the gradient texture to preview it. And then with the gradient texture selected, I can also press Control T, and that's going to add the texture coordinate and mapping. Now I don't need the mapping, so I can press X to delete it, and I want to use the object coordinates, so let's put the object into the vector. And then I don't just want to use the linear gradient, I want to click on the linear, and I'm going to instead change this to the radial. So the radial is going to make it black here, and then as it goes around, it's going to get lighter and lighter. Now I don't want this to be super sharp, I want it to get darker and then get lighter, because I want to make some red and white lines going around for the peppermint swirl. So I'm going to press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the math node, and let's stick the math node here after the gradient texture. And then if I click right here on add, under rounding, I'm going to change it to ping pong. And so this way, now you can see that it's going to be black over here and then white over here. Now I want to make lots of these black lines. So to do that, I can click on the ping pong and I can press Shift D to duplicate it. Let's drop it here before the first one. And then if I click here to change this, I can change it to the multiply under functions. So now if I turn the value up on the multiply, you can see it's duplicating it and spinning it around. So I am going to change the value to 14 because I want 14 of them. I think that is pretty good. And then we can take the value here and let's put that into the base color of the principled shader, and I can Control Shift and select the principled shader to preview it. Now I want to change the colors here because they're just white and black, so I'm going to press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I can search for the color ramp, and let's stick the color ramp here between the ping pong and the principled. And so now I can drag these together, and if I drag them together, they're going to be much more contrasty. So I'm going to drag this kind of to about here, and also drag the white tab over to about there. And then I want to change the colors, so if I click on this black tab here, I can click on the color, and I'm just going to make this fully white, and then I'm going to make it a bright red color for the peppermint colors. Now I want this to be swirling around to kind of give it that peppermint candy effect. So what I want to do is distort these lines that we've created. So to do that, I can press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I can search for the wave texture, and let's stick the wave texture under the gradient. And I can plug the object up to the vector, and I can Control Shift and select the wave texture. So what I want to do is I want to make just one line here, and that dark line is going to distort the other lines that we've created. So let's take the X here, and I can turn this to the Z so that's going back and forth. And then I want to turn the scale way down so there's just one big line. So I'm going to turn the scale to a 0.1. So you can see it's black here and then it's white up here. So if the values are darker, it's going to distort it more. But if the values are lighter, then it's not going to distort it at all. So to make the wave texture distort these lines, I'm going to press Shift A. I'm going to go here to the search, and I'm going to search for the mix RGB, and let's put the mix RGB in between the two math nodes. And then I want to take this color here from the wave texture, and I want to put that into color 2, and then the multiply is going to go into color 1. And I can Control Shift and select the color ramp to preview it. Now I can drag the factor to change how much it's being distorted, but I want to click on the mix here, and I want to first change this to linear light, and that way it's going to distort it, but it's not going to be moving around so much. Because when this was set to mix, if you drag the factor, you can see it's rotating around a lot. So if I change the mix instead to linear light, it's going to show all of those lines, and it'll just distort it more naturally. So that is pretty good. And I'm going to turn the factor all the way up to 1. You can of course change this to whatever amount you want to be distorted. Now I actually want it to be distorted a bit more, so I'm going to click on this multiply, and I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate it, and let's drop it here after the wave texture. So we're going to use this multiply to multiply the wave texture values. Now that is way too strong, so I'm going to turn the value way down, and I'm going to turn the value just to like a 2. But you could turn this up if you want to, so if you continue to turn the value up, it's going to distort it more and more and rotate it around. But I think 2 is pretty good. So now I can Control Shift and select the principled shader to preview it. Now I also want the peppermint values to control the roughness, because where it is red, I want to be a different roughness from where it is white. So let's take the color here from the color amp and I can put that into the roughness. But now to be able to control the roughness values better, I'm going to click on the color amp and I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate it, and I can stick it right here before it goes into the roughness. And then I can click on the backspace to reset the color ramp. So if the values are darker, they're going to be more shiny. So if I click on this white tab right here, I can turn this down. You can see it's going to be very shiny. I want to turn this up though, because I do want it to be pretty rough. And then on this black tab right here, that is going to control the red values. And so right now it's very reflective, but I actually want to turn this up so it's a bit more rough. So something like that is pretty good, still pretty shiny, and I do want the red part to be more reflective. I think that looks really cool, and then the white part is going to be less reflective. And there we go, so now we have a peppermint candy Christmas ornament. Alright, so the next ornament that we're going to make is the wavy one. It's going to be a wavy yellow one. So I'm going to select these two objects here. I can press Shift D to duplicate, click and drag with my mouse wheel, bring it over and place it there. And then if I click right here to select this object, I want to duplicate the material. So I'm going to click right here and that'll duplicate the material. And I can rename this, and I'm going to rename this to Ornament Wavy. Ornament Wavy. And then what I can do is click and drag to box select all these nodes here, and I can press X to delete. So for the ornament, make sure that you turn the metallic value all the way up to 1 so that it is metallic and shiny. So to make the wavy texture, I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the gradient texture. Let's drop it here, and I want to change the linear to radial. And then I can Control Shift and select the gradient texture to preview it. And with the gradient texture selected, I'm going to press Control T to add the texture coordinate and mapping. And let's plug the object into the vector, and I don't need the mapping, so I can select the mapping and press X to delete it. So you can see the gradient set to radial is going to start out as black and then go around and turn more white, but I want it to be a smooth transition between the black part and the white part. So I'm going to press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the math node, and let's put the math node here after the gradient. And then if I click on here and add, I'm going to change this to the ping pong. And so this way, now it's going to get black, and then it's going to start to get white. So then it's going to be white over here on this side and black over here on this side. Now I want to duplicate these black lines and rotate them around. So to do that, I'm going to click on the ping pong, and I can press Shift D to duplicate it, and let's stick it here before the first one. And then I want to click here to change the ping pong, and I'm going to change it to multiply under functions. So now if you turn the value up on the multiply, it's going to basically duplicate it and move it around. So it's going to multiply those values, and now we have a bunch of different lines there. Now I want to click on the value, and I'm going to change it to 25, so there are 25 of those lines. Now I want to distort these lines so that it is wavy and it's going back and forth. So to do this, I can press Shift A, I can go to the search, and I'm going to search for the wave texture, and let's put the wave texture underneath the gradient. And then I can put the object into the vector, and let's Control Shift and select the wave texture. So I want the waves to be going back and forth, so I'm actually going to click on the X here, and I'm going to change it to Z instead. Now I'm going to use the light and dark values of the wave texture to distort these other lines. So on this wave texture here, I want to make the scale much smaller. So I'm just going to turn the scale to like a 0.3, and now it's black here, and then white here, and then it goes to black, and then white and black again. So then to make the wave texture distort the other lines, I'm going to press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the Mix RGB, and let's put the Mix RGB in between the two math nodes. And we can put the color into color 2, and then the multiply is going to go into color 1. So I can kind of bring this back, and I'm just going to Control Shift and select the ping pong. So you can see that now it's distorting the other lines. So where the wave texture is black, it's going to be pushing the lines this way, but then where the waves are white, it's going to be just moving it back. So if I Control Shift and select the ping pong, you can see now it's moving back and forth. Now if I drag the factor, that's going to control the strength of it, but you can see when I drag the factor, it's kind of moving the texture around. So I'm going to click on the mix here, and I'm going to instead change it to linear light. So this way I can drag the factor and it's going to distort it, but it won't move the texture around. So I'm going to turn the factor to 0.7. I think 0.7 is pretty good. Now there are some other values you could change. So you could change the scale. So if you want there to be lots of waves kind of going back and forth, you could turn that wave down. That's looking pretty cool. I'm just going to leave it at 0.3, but you could definitely turn that down. You could also change this value here to change how many of those waves there are. And also this factor here will control the strength. And if you wanted to control the strength a lot more, you could actually add another multiply by duplicating the multiply, and you could put it after the wave texture, and then you can use the value to change how strong that is. So if you wanted it to be very distorted, you could add that multiply and distort it a lot. I am not going to do that, so with the multiply selected, I can press Ctrl X to delete it. So I now want the white and black values to actually displace the object. So I'm going to take the value and I'm going to put that into the displacement, and then I can Control Shift and select the principled shader. So the ping pong is going to go into the displacement and the principled shader can just go into the surface. Now something that's really important to make sure the displacement is working, if you go right here to the material properties and open up the settings, right here on the displacement, you need to make sure it's set to displacement and bump, and this way the material can actually use the displacements. Now something is wrong here, it's kind of jutting off to the side, and that's because we need to convert the black and white data into displacement data. So I can press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I can search for the displacement node, and let's drop it here, and then I can just drag it and like stick it down here. And then to actually convert it to proper displacement data, we want the ping pong to be going into the height value of the displacement. So now it's actually working, but it's way too strong. So let's just turn the scale way down to just like a 0.1, and that is much better. I can also click and drag to box select these nodes and kind of bring them down here so that the wire isn't stretching quite as far. Now if I zoom in here, you can see that it's very, very sharp, and I don't want it to be that sharp. I want it to be much more smooth. So we can control these ping pong values, and we can make these values more subtle and more smooth. So I'm going to Control Shift and select the principled shader again. So to make these edges more smooth, I can press Shift A. Let's go to the search, and I can search for the RGB curves, and let's stick the RGB curves after the ping pong. And then I can click here in the center to add a dot, and then I can also click right here on this dot and I can drag this down to the bottom. So basically this shape right here is going to be the same shape of those rounded areas. So I can drag this down, make this a bit smaller, just like that. And then I also want to make this a bit more round, so I'm going to hold down the Control key and click to add another dot. I'm going to drag this over, hold down the Control key and click to add another dot and kind of bring that over so it's a bit more flat. And then right here in the creases you can see it's still a bit more sharp, and that's because right here it ends really sharp and then it kind of comes up here. So I can drag these two dots up a bit to make them a bit more smooth, and I can also hold down the Control key and click right here to add another dot, and I want to make this right here, I want to make this flat at the end. And also I want to hold down the Control key and click right here to add another dot, and I'm going to drag this one down, something like that, so I just want it to be flat there at the end. And now you can see that that is looking much more smooth, and that's looking really nice. Now I also want to make this look like it's a bit more strong, so I want to put the RGB curves into the normal. So I'm going to drag this back, and then I can take the RGB curves color and let's put that into the normal. But then I need to convert the color data into normal data. You can see it looks really weird right now. So to fix that, I can press Shift A. Let's go to the search, and I can search for the bump node, and we want to put the bump node in between the RGB curves and the normal. So the bump node can actually convert the color data into normal data. And then to actually convert it properly, we want the color to be going into the height value. So now it looks really, really strong. So I just want to make it more subtle. So I'm going to turn the strength to a 0.2, and that is looking much better. Now, as for the color, you can make it any color that you want, but I want to make it kind of like a gold color. So let's take the base color, and I'm going to make this kind of like a yellow color, kind of like a yellowish gold color. So something like that is really nice. And then you can also change the roughness, whether you want it more rough or more shiny, but I actually want to put a texture into the roughness to kind of give it a speckly texture. So I'm going to press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the Voronoi texture, and let's put the Voronoi down here. And then I want to take the object coordinates and I want to put it into the vector of the Voronoi, and the object coordinates will place the texture on the object more evenly. And then I want to Control Shift and select the Voronoi texture twice so that we can preview the color values. So I want to turn the scale on the Voronoi texture to like 200, and now you can see that we just have a little speckly texture there with some little shapes. So I want this color now to control the roughness, so let's put the color into the roughness, and then I can control shift and select the principled shader. Now I want to have more control over this because some parts are way too rough, so I'm going to press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I can search for the color ramp, and I want to put the color ramp right here before it goes into the roughness. So if the colors are darker, they're going to be more shiny. So if I click on the white tab here, I can make this darker and everything's going to be a bit more shiny. And then on this black tab here, I want to click on this color and turn it up a bit so that everything will be a bit more rough. So something like that, although I think I'll make this a little bit brighter, and also this tab here, I think I'll make that a bit brighter. So something like that is pretty good. And also I think I'll make this base color a little bit more towards the yellow. So there we go, there is the Wavy Ornament. So we just have one more left, and that is the little dots. So I'm going to press 1 on the numpad to go to front view, and I can select this object, hold down the shift key, select this object, and I'll press Shift D to duplicate, click and drag with my mouse wheel to constrain it to the x-axis and stick it there. And then if I click on this object here, I want to duplicate the material, so I can click on this button right here to duplicate the material, and I want to rename this one to Ornament Dots. So then what I can do is click and drag and box select all the nodes, and I can press X to delete them, or just click on the delete key. So for this material, first make sure the metallic value is turned all the way up to 1 so it looks metallic. So to make the little dots on this one, I'm going to press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the Voronoi texture, and let's drop the Voronoi texture down here. And then I can Control Shift and select the Voronoi texture to preview it. And you can see the Voronoi texture is going to make all these little dots. Now I want to turn the scale down, so I'm going to turn the scale just to like a 3. And then with the Voronoi texture selected, I'm also going to press Ctrl T. That will add the texture coordinate and mapping. And I want to use the object coordinate so that it places the texture on the object more evenly. So let's put the object on the vector. And then I don't need the mapping, so I can select the mapping and press X to delete it. So now we just have all those little dots there. Now I want to make these dots much more sharp. So I'm going to press Shift A, let's go to the search, and I can search for the color ramp, and let's put the color ramp right here after the Voronoi distance. And then if I click on the linear here, I want to change it to constant. So I can now take this white tab and I can drag it over, and because it's constant, there's not going to be any blending, and so now we just have these little circles there. And then also I find that turning the randomness value down looks a bit better. If you turn the randomness value too much down, it kind of looks like a pattern, but I'm just going to turn the Voronoi randomness to like a 0.5. I like that a bit better. And then you can just kind of drag this around to make that bigger or smaller. And then let's change the colors. So on this black tab here, I actually want to make this fully white. And then on this white tab over here, I want to make this a green color. So let's make it green, something like that. And then I can take the color and let's put this into the base color of the principled shader. And I can Control Shift and select the principled shader. And you can also drag this around if you want to make those dots lighter or darker. So something like that is pretty good. Now I want to add a tiny little bit of noise to the edges of these dots. So to do that, I'm going to press Shift A. Let's go to the search, and I'm going to search for the noise texture, and let's just stick the noise texture down here. And then let's put the object into the vector of the noise texture, and I can Control Shift and select the noise texture to preview it. So I'm going to turn the scale of the noise texture just to like a 3, but then let's turn the detail all the way to the max of 15, so it's very detailed. So to make the noise texture distort the placement of the Voronoi, I'm going to press Shift A, I'm going to go to the search, and I'm going to search for the Mix RGB, and let's put the Mix RGB here before the Voronoi. And then I want to mix between the original object coordinates and the noise texture. So the noise texture color is going to go into color 2, and then the object is going to go into color 1. So I can now Control Shift and select the principled shader, and you can see it's distorting it so much, and so now it's just kind of these random shapes. So I can drag the factor down, and it's going to distort it less. Now you can see that the texture is being being moved all around. So to make it so it doesn't move around, I'm going to click on the mix here, and I'm going to change the mix RGB to a linear light. So this way I can drag the factor and it will distort it, but it won't move the texture around quite as much. So I want to make it very subtle, so let's turn the factor to a 0.03. So this way it's mostly using color 1, which is the original object coordinates, but it's just using a tiny little bit of the noise texture. So if you zoom way in, you can see it just looks a little bit more random, and that does look very nice. Now I actually want the dots to be a different roughness than the green area. So I can take the color and I can put that into the roughness, but then I want to have more control over the colors. So I can click on this color ramp and I can press Shift D to duplicate it, and I can drop it right here after this color ramp before it goes into the roughness. And then I want to drag this back, so I want to drag this way over here, and then I actually want to take this green color and I want to go here to the RGB, and I want to turn all these values to 1 so that it is fully white. So I can then just take the white color and I want to make this darker, and so this value here is going to control how shiny the dots are. So I want to make this lighter so that the dots are a bit less shiny, but then I want the green to be a bit more shiny. So if I click over here on this white tab, I can turn this down, and if I make it darker, it's going to make that green area more shiny. And then I also want the dots to look like they're popping out a little bit. So I'm going to take the distance from the Voronoi and let's put that into the normal. But then we need to convert this to normal data. You can see there's some weird shading issues, and that's because this distance here is black and white data, but then the purple dot here, that is normal data. So we need to convert it to normal data. So I can press Shift A. Let's go to the search, and I can search for the bump node, and let's stick the bump node in between the Voronoi and the normal. And then we want the distance to be going into the height value to convert it to normal data. Now it's looking really weird, and that is because if I Control Shift and select the Voronoi isn't very sharp. So to make it more sharp, I just want to take one of these color ramps. I'll just take this one, and I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate it, and let's drop it down here. And then with this color ramp selected, I can hit the backspace and that will reset it. And then I can Control Shift and select the principled shader to preview it. So basically, I just want right here on the edge of the dots to be kind of bumpy. So I'm going to drag the black tab and drag the white tab together, and as I drag these together, that bump is going to be in a much smaller area because we're making it more contrasty. So I want to drag the white tab over so that the white tab starts right here. So basically, the bump isn't going to start until the white area starts. Then I can drag the black tab over, and I'm going to drag the black tab very close, and so that way there's just going to be a little bit of a bump kind of on the edge there of those circles, so just like that. And then I do want it to be a bit less strong, so let's take the strength of the bump, and I can just turn that down to like a 0.3. So that is looking much better. Now it looks like the dots are actually popping in instead of popping out. So to change that, I can just click on the invert button, and that way the dots look like they're popping out just a little bit. And then also I think I might play around with the color ramp here to change the roughness. So I might turn this down so that they're a bit more shiny and they look a bit more like metal. So something like that is pretty good. So you can just press Control S to save the Blender file, and there we have it. So there are all of the 10 procedural Christmas ornaments. So I'm just going to render this now, and then we'll do a little bit of compositing to make the final image look really nice. So I'm going to click right back over here to the layout because we are done with the compositing. And I'm going to hold down the Z button and go back to solid view. So of course, if you wanted to, you could add these to a scene. You could also watch my Christmas tree tutorial, links in the description. But I'm just going to render out a shot with all of these. So I'm going to press Shift A, and I can go right down here and add a camera. And then you can just move to wherever you want the camera to be, and then you can press Control Alt Numpad 0, and that's going to hop the camera to your view. And then you can press the G key to move the camera around if the camera is selected. You can also press the G key and then double tap the Z key, and that'll move the camera in and out. And also with the camera selected, if you go to the object data properties, I want to turn the focal length up of the camera, and that'll make everything look a bit more flat. And then I might also just zoom out a bit more. So something like that. I could also click and drag just to box select some of these ornaments, and I could bring them up on the Z axis, and also press the B key for the box select these ornaments and bring them down a bit. So if I hold down the Z button, go up into the rendered view, that is looking really nice. So before I render this, I want to click right up here to go to the render properties, and I want to open up the sampling, and I'm just going to set the render samples to 200. If that's going to take too long for your computer, you could turn it down, but if you add more samples, it will look nicer. And we will also add the denoise node in the compositor to denoise the image. So you can press Ctrl S to save, and then you can click on render and render image, or you can press the shortcut key of F12. And the render has finished. So now let's just do a little bit of compositing to make this look really nice. So I'm going to click right over here to go to the compositing tab, and then I can also drag this and make it smaller because we don't need the timeline, and I can click on use nodes to use the compositing nodes. And then I want to click and drag and bring this over. And then what I want to do is just have a single wire that I can add nodes to. So I'm going to hold down the shift key and then right click and drag and then let go. And that's going to add a reroute. And then we turned on the Node Wrangler add-on earlier in the tutorial. So what you can do is Control Shift and select the reroute. And that's going to add a viewer node. And the viewer node will allow you to see the final compositing in the background. And you can also press V to zoom the background out and Alt V to zoom the background in. So now let's just do some compositing. So I first want to press Shift A, go to the search, and I want to search for the denoise just to denoise the image and smooth it out. And also on the accurate, I'll just change this to fast. And then I also want to make the background black. So what I'm going to do is press Shift A, go to the search, and I'm going to search for the alpha overnode, and I'll just stick the alpha overnode right here. And then I want the denoise to be going into the bottom image, and then the top image is going to be the background, so I'll just make this fully black. And then I can also click and drag to select these nodes and bring them back a bit. So then the last node that I want to add, if I press Shift A, go to the search, I want to search for the glare node. Let's click on the glare node, and I can just drop it right here. And then I want to take the streaks, and I want to instead change this to fog glow. I like the fog glow look. You could also use the streaks if you want to. That does look pretty nice. I am going to use the fog glow because I like how that looks. So the fog glow is just going to make the shiny bits more reflective and add that glare there. So you could do some color correction or do some other things in the compositing, but I'm now just going to save this image. So to save the final image, you can press the F11 key, or you can click right here and go to the image editor. And then this is the render result, but I actually want to click right up here on the drop down, and I want to change this to the viewer node. So there is the finished composited image. So to save this image, you can click on image and click on save as. And I'll just save this in a folder on my computer as a PNG file, and I'll just click on save as. So there we have it. There is the 10 procedural Christmas ornaments. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and thank you so much for watching. And Christmas of 2022 is almost here. So Merry Christmas everyone, and I hope y'all have a great Christmas. And if you'd like to watch more of my Christmas themed tutorials, then definitely check out my Christmas Blender tutorial playlist with the link in the description. And if you'd like to create a Christmas tree to add the Christmas ornaments to, then you can also check out my Christmas tree Blender tutorial series, which I created last year. I'll have the link in the description to that tutorial series. And if you'd like to help support this channel and purchase the tutorial files, then you can do that on my Gumroad store and my Patreon page with the links in the description. And I do appreciate your support. But thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this, and Merry Christmas.